In today's video, I'm going to break down why retirement spending skyrockets beginning at age 65. I've been a certified financial planner for over a decade, and every year I help retirees create safe spending plans that beat the uncertainty that retirement throws at them. Spending is one of the trickiest things to plan for in retirement. Out of fear, we can underspend, creating regrets later in life, or we can be too aggressive and we can overspend and really restrict our spending later in life if we're not careful. This can create years of stressful budgeting. Today, not only will I explain why spending skyrockets beginning at age 65, but I'll also break down what you can do in the future to keep your spending under control. So let's get into the video. First thing you want to consider is what we call the go-go years. Let me explain. When you're thinking about how much money you want to spend in retirement, you might arrive at a number and say, well, I want $10,000 per month, and then I'm going to add inflation to that, and you're going to take it from there. And that's thinking in a very linear way, but that's not how it happens in real life. Studies show that almost all retirees spend more money earlier in retirement and then less money throughout the middle of retirement, and then it's going to go back up to cover healthcare costs towards the end of retirement. This has been referred to as the go-go years, the slow-go years, and the no-go years. So if you draw it out on a chart, it can sometimes look like a smile, which is where you sometimes hear retirement planners talking about the retirement spending smile. So the go-go years are associated with increased spending. People tend to spend more money because every day is Saturday. We no longer have work distracting us from spending money. We tend to push that Amazon button a few more times as we pursue our hobbies. We take that celebration vacation and then we take 10 more. Then we decide to take up gardening. Then we turn our backyard into a tropical paradise. You get the idea. People are remodeling their kitchen. They're doing the things that they wanted to do, but they couldn't do when they were distracted by work. Now, there are two types of new retiree spenders. You've got people who do all the stuff, and then you've got people who are overcautious and they're counting every dollar. On the one hand, you've got the risk of really blowing it, or on the other hand, you've got the risk of being disappointed and not really getting the most out of life. So to the super cautious people, you should read the book Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. Recently, my wife Connie was reading this book in our home office, and she looked up and she said out loud, "I love this book." And the reason she said that is that she didn't want to miss out, and she felt like we're in danger of missing out on those life experiences that you really should try to have. Recently, I was sad to learn that Shannon Doherty had passed away. And if you don't know who she is, she was the actor from Beverly Hills 90210. And she passed away at such a young age in her early 50s. And it really just struck me. And I thought about, what if my wife were to pass away early and never get to experience the stuff that we talked about doing? My point is that overcaution is its own risk, but so is overspending. I'm going to give you some advice that's going to help both types of retirement spending during this go-go season. And that is, it's just a season. Plan for it and you'll enjoy it. So remember, it's just one season. It's not the rest of your life. You're not going to completely go and blow it. Plan for it, enjoy it, and don't do it for 30 years in a row. It can be helpful for you to decide which money you spend is essential and which is discretionary. And all you have to do is make a list, do this exercise, and go through that list and decide which of this money that I'm spending is absolutely essential, and check that off. All the things you didn't check would become discretionary spending, and knowing what those two amounts are can be very useful. A 2018 study shown by the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that there is a shift in the percentage of money that we're spending in essentials versus discretionary over time. So from the ages of 65 to about 74, we're spending 40% of our total on discretionary spending. But then when we hit 75 and older, it drops to about 32% of our total is spent on discretionary, which means that there's more money that's covering our essentials. And one explanation for this would be the cost of healthcare. Cost of healthcare tends to be lower for somebody who's 65 years old than it is for somebody who's over the age of 75. So of course, there's going to be that natural shift from discretionary to essential. Another reason people age 65 and up are spending more money has to do with recent price cost in food and transportation. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the cost of food as a category in 2012 went from about $5,000 a year to $7,300 in 2022, and transportation went from $6,300 a year year to about $8,200 a year. And most of this bump happened from 2017 to 2022. If you're curious about how your personal spending stacks up against everybody else, there was a 2022 survey done of total household spending according to age group. It's about $70,000 a year for people ages 55 to 64, and it drops to $56,000 a year for people ages 65 to 74. And for people who are over 75, that number drops down to $49,000 per year. Now, if that seems like a low number to you, you have to remember when they do these surveys, they're including people with very high incomes and people with very low incomes. So those averages are probably not going to be anywhere close to what you're actually spending. But what about housing? The same survey shows that the average housing costs go down as we get older. A 55-year-old spends about $22,000 a year on housing. The average 65-year-old spends $19,000 a year on housing. And if you're over 75, that number drops to $17,000 a year in the costs for your housing. And I think we could probably attribute this to the fact that people are trying to get their houses paid off. Of course, a major part of controlling your costs throughout retirement is to look at your cost of housing both now and in the future. Whether you plan to downsize, relocate, or do what they call age in place, you want to plan ahead. And you want to be wise about housing. Here's an example of what you don't want to do. We had a family a few years back who was excited to tell us about their new dream home that they had purchased. We thought that maybe they had downsized, but to our surprise, they bought a house that was 3 times more expensive than their previous home when we had created their financial plan. They were 5 years from retirement. They were high income, so they could afford the mortgage, but they were low net worth, which means they weren't adequately saved to have that retirement to be as comfortable as they want to. Sadly, they have a pretty tight and constricted retirement these days because they put it all into their housing. So pay attention to how much you're going to be spending and where you're going to be living. So how does spending change from your age 55 to say 65 in those first several years of retirement? Well, studies show that your costs between age 55, which you're spending at 55, and what you begin to spend in retirement are going to drop. And many people believe this to be true, and they describe it because they say, well, I'm no longer going to have to pay to park at work. I'm not going to be tailoring my suits any longer. I'm not going to be eating out at work as much, and I'm not going to be putting money in my 401k. And what we overlook is the fact that we're going to be eating out with our spouse now. We're going to be driving more, even though we're not parking in the parking garage at the office. We're not going to be tailoring suits, but we are going to be buying more expensive golf shirts and things like that. And so essentially we just replace what we were doing at work with some of our hobby items and some of the way we're going to be spending our time when, again, work is no longer distracting us. So some of the stuff that these studies don't show you is what happens in real life when we have those extra special things that we didn't really talk about when it came to our annual desired spending. And it's a good exercise for us to plan on that extra spending. Go ahead and figure out what that extra spending is going to be so that it doesn't surprise us and it can be included in your overall retirement budget. So there are a couple of ways you can go about budgeting your retirement spending. The first way is called the replacement ratio. Now, this can be the lazy man's way of doing it because many people don't want to budget, and trying to plan for future spending is like the impossible, tedious task. And so the replacement ratio is used as an alternative. It's an easy way to look at it. Basically, a replacement ratio is just a percentage of what you earn today. For lower income people, you can use a higher percentage. And for higher income people, you're going to actually have a lower percentage of replacement because it could be more difficult to replace that higher level of income. Fidelity has a study that says that if you earn $50,000 or less, that you can use a number like 80%. So you try to replace 80% of $50,000. But if you're earning $80,000 a year to say $120,000, then that replacement ratio needs to be more like 70%. And then for people who earn more than $120,000, then that percentage needs to be 55 to 65%. So the way this shakes out is that if you're earning $50,000 a year, your replacement ratio would be $40,000. Or if you're earning $150,000, then you're going to probably try to shoot for anywhere from $85,000 closer to $100,000 a year in replacement. Now, the study also shows that you would add travel and spending. If you're a super active person who does a lot of things, they say to add an additional percentage to this. I personally don't like the replacement ratio way of doing it. I like to get a little bit more detailed. It's not that difficult to do, and I'll tell you how to do it. The easy way is to get a spreadsheet, write down everything that you spend per category, and then discuss with your spouse on the other category and think through how much you're going to spend on that other column when you're no longer working. This can help you to catch things like buying Christmas gifts or unique things that are important to you. And then you can total up that number at the very bottom, and that's going to give you a number. Then you're going to want to do one more thing, and that is you're going to want to ask 2 questions. Question number 1, is there any big expenses that I'm going to be spending money on during the first couple of years of retirement? Meaning, am I going to remodel my kitchen? We had a guy want to buy a tractor so he can dig a pond for himself on his property. What are those big purchases that you're going to make at retirement? And then the second question is what debts or bills are going to go away? Like maybe I'm paying my RV off, or maybe my house is going to get paid off. What are some of those debts that we're going to be retiring? And we're going to just take those numbers and we're going to set them aside, especially the lump sum numbers. We're not going to include that in our annual spending that we're trying to replace, because we can set that aside for special needs. So after the go years, we start to slow down a little bit. Over time, we're taking less trips. And then we get to what we call the no-go years. We don't like to talk about the no-go years. It's not fun to talk about it. People say it begins at 75. I don't like to attach an age to it because, for example, I like to do road biking with a group of people, and we ride very fast for several miles. And there's a person in his mid-70s that can kick my butt on the road any day of the week. So instead of attaching it to an age, let's just say this is the time when healthcare costs start to become more significant and we start to have less discretionary spending. So we're headed towards those no-go years. And this can be really difficult to plan for because we don't know how healthy we're going to be. We don't know how our healthcare insurance is going to change and if it's going to cover the needs that we have. And we're not sure if we're going to need some assistance and what type of assistance we're going to be needing. So people tend to put it off and not think about it. In fact, the big problem with the no-go season is we either put it off because it's just something we don't want to think about, we put it off because it's too difficult to try to actually plan for the future, or we actually think that we might be covered because people forget that Medicare does not cover custodial needs. It's common for people to miss this, okay? Medicare covers healthcare needs. It does not cover custodial needs. And the easy way to remember this is that Medicare covers a broken arm or diabetes, but it's not going to cover helping you to feed yourself or drive yourself if you can't do those things. And so that's custodial care. And that's what a lot of Americans are missing, is really adequate protection for that. So we know this is going to happen. So what can we do about it? Well, the first thing we can do is not ignore it, right? Let's get informed as much as we can. And you're doing that in part by watching videos like this. And the next thing you can do is learn what options you have so that you can make a plan. The goal is for you to stop looking only at the beginning of retirement and instead plan for all the stages of your retirement spending. Following this video, you know why spending at retirement can skyrocket beginning at age 65. You can analyze your own situation and see what risks you have so that you can begin to take action in those areas. However, if you truly want to ensure that you're going to retire with calmness and clarity for a very long time, there are many details, including those end-of-life things that we're not able to cover in videos like this. So if you're interested in having a team of professionals look at your specific situation, help you design a plan so that you can have that long, stress-free retirement, click the link in the description to book a no-cost consultation with my team. See you in the next video.